Respected Justice S. Muralidhar, former Chief Justice of the Orissa High Court, President of the Music Academy, Mr. N. Murali, Sangita Kalanidhi, Dr. S. Soumya, Sangita Kalanidhi, Bombay Jai Sri Ramnath, Vice Presidents, Secretaries, Committee members of the Music Academy, many of the great Vidwans who are present here, artists of song and instrumental, practitioners of dance and its accompanying arts, friends, connoisseurs of music, my vanakkam and namaskarams to all of you. It is indeed an honor to be standing before you on this stage, a proscenium on which I have witnessed, experience would be perhaps a better word, the right word, memorable musical moments, some that have transformed my life forever. I began learning Carnatic music as a young boy with absolutely no idea why I was doing so. Little did I know then that I was entering an oral topography that would so infuse my imagination as to eventually become me. Even while we study and practice this art form, we are not fully aware of what it has to offer. We learn music with an almost mechanical fidelity, initially doing just as we are told. As time goes by, whatever we were instructed in becomes ingrained as habit. And we are convinced that that repetitive act is creative. And more, it is creative freedom. Honing our techniques, expanding our repertoire, replicating concert success, and upskilling keeps us very busy. Pleasing the audience is very pleasing. And applause becomes in itself a kind of music to the musician's ears. We are left with very little time to pause and reflect on the music and ourselves. Our minds are so fixed on performance that the stage takes over the song. Questions such as, why am I singing this musical form? And what am I sharing with all of you every time I take the stage seem too abstract and esoteric as to warrant contemplation. But asking them is essential if we want to truly immerse in the splendor of this art form. Any cultural or intellectual initiative requires the canopy of an overarching philosophical framework. It is within the shelter of that structure that the details, even the nuts and bolts, have to be worked on. If we do not, all we will have is a rudderless ship. As it has been said before by many great musicians, India's gift to the world of music is the raga, which is at the very core of Carnatic music. Every moment in a concert is drenched with the fragrances of the ragas that we delve into. Raga is both a singular melodic possibility and, most beautifully, its own plural. A concert needs to be a raga experience. In a non-musical sense, raga is an evocative or evoked state. We can neither dictate one emotion nor confine it to one feeling. Every individual draws what she, they, or he seeks from it. Musically, I would further enlarge the word and include within its meaning tala, laya, sahitya, sollukattu, and every rhythmic sound. Then, the question that we need to ask ourselves is, are we evoking raga? When Vidwan Shammugudi Srinivasayar opened the shloka Maulau Ganga Shashankau, when Vidwan Shammugudi Srinivasayar opened the shloka Maulau Ganga Shashankau, hovering on that Panchama, when Vidushi T. Brinda sang Yemana Dichevo, and the first syllables Yemana would stand tantalizingly on the Rishabha. When Vidwan M.D. Ramanathan glided across an entire octave, eschewing commonly heard gamakas. When Vidushi M.S. Subbalakshmi's every Sangati in an alapana dazzled like the stars in the sky. When Palghat Maniyar executed furans at the speed of sound. When Parani Subramaniam Pillai played his trademark chorways. When S. Balachandra tugged at the veena strings, stumbling upon one gem after another, ignoring even the need for a pluck. And when Vidwan V. Nagarajan's stroke thundered on the Ganjira, they were all embracing raga and inviting us into its domain. This year, at the Music Academy's 98th annual conference, scholars, musicians, actors, dancers, and historians will present papers on the theme Aesthetics and Synesthetics, Reflections on Raga in Indian Art. The conference will focus on the various manifestations of raga through history, in practice, and its independent identities and roles across art forms. Academicians will also explore melodies that exist beyond the realm of the raga. In a very strict musicological sense, Carnatic music is a melodic form. But on more careful observation reveals within it an unrecognized symphony. Just for a moment, imagine in your mind's eye the vocal rendition of a kirtana. The sahitya travels along with the raga as words, syllables, consonants, and vowels. They extend and contract, changing their shape as required by the raga, but also simultaneously defining the raga's contours. In concord with these textual markers, the raga flowers, finds new expression, rests, and even offers flourishes of extravagance. These two partners, Sahitya and Raga, are placed carefully onto a time signature, Tala, which has its own silent and sonic gesticulations that regulate laya. The kirtana keeps moving in between and across these divisions. Every time you hear the palm strike, an acoustic layer is added to the kirtana. When you notice the fingers being counted, the impression of the music also changes. As the singer renders the kirtana, the violinist is just behind. Like the sounds that reflect off the hillside, the violinist is actually reminding us of the singer's previous raga location. On the other side of the stage is the mridangam and the ghatam, ganjira or mohar singh artists, who together reshape the various sensibilities of time, focus our attention on specific sections, camouflage even conflicts, and give form to the composition and allow the entire creation to sink into our minds. If even one of these components moves out of place, the integrity of the music ends. Depending on whether a kirtana, neraval, kalpanaswara, taniyavartana or alapana is being rendered, these elements reconfigure themselves. If this isn't symphony, I would not know what is. I can provide many literal reasons as to why we come together in this musical union, but I'm very aware that none of those explanations really address the deep question of why. Why come and make music like this? Maybe the most profound response as to why we embark on this creative endeavor is to say that there is no need for a reason, no conscious causation. Just the magnificence of the experience itself suffices. I have no doubt in my mind, absolutely no doubt in my mind, that Bhakti is a non-negotiable aspect of Carnatic music. But like all words, we need to think very carefully about what we mean. Bhakti is undivided, unqualified, untainted, complete surrender that cannot be constricted or compartmentalized. I would like to just repeat that statement again. Bhakti is undivided, unqualified, untainted, complete surrender that cannot be constricted or compartmentalized. Even more, it cannot be owned, stuffed into dogmas and forced upon anyone. The state of the bhakta is vulnerability. Being able to see, listen, receive and share abundantly without having to cling on to any crutch. This is the opening Carnatic music provides me every time I sit with my tambura. This bhakti is freedom in surrender, liberation in devotion, bonding in the unity of fusion. ஒரு தமிழ் சொல் இருக்கு, ஆழ்வார்னு ஒரு சொல் இருக்கு. ஆழ்வார் அந்த ரொம்ப அழகான சொல். நல்லா ஆழ்ந்து, டு பி ட்ரவுண்ட், நல்லா ஆழத்தில் ஆழ்ந்து இருக்கிறது அவங்க தான் ஆழ்வார். பக்தியில் ஆழ்ந்து இருக்கிறவா ஆழ்வார். அந்த தளத்தோட ரொம்ப ஒரு முக்கியமான இடம் என்னென்னா, அந்த ஆழ்ந்த தளத்துக்கு நம்ம போயிட்டோம்னா அந்த தளமே நம்ம ரியாலிட்டிக்கு ஒரு கொஸ்டின் மார்க். That is, to be in the state of drowning is a challenge to how we are as human beings in everyday's life. It is not contained by identities, personalities, any kind of division that we are so obsessed with. Carnatic music must be able to place us in that state. That is bhakti. Everything else can wait. But Carnatic musicians are not just products of the present. We carry the past on our shoulders and hope to pass on something to the future. The word that envelops our musical minds from the moment we come in contact with Carnatic music is Sampradaya, which we use to mean both tradition and convention. As a tradition, it signifies the continuum of multiple threads of thoughts that constitute Carnatic music. It is also a musical landscape that holds within it the sound of Carnatic music. If you were to ask me, has this sound remained the same from time immemorial, I wouldn't know the answer. A study of the musical treatises from at least the 16th century helps us trace, to some extent, the journey of the ragas and the talas that we today call Carnatic. But we do not know how Yanduku Nirdaya sounded when Tyagaraja sang it for the first time, or the intricacies in the Pallavi that Shyama Shastri is said to have rendered in Sharabanandana Tala, or the musical nature of Ghanamarga that Bobilu Keshavaya presented in the Tanjavur court. But some anecdotes from the past help us connect with those times. U.A. Swaminatha Iyer's description of the events that unfolded when Ghanam Krishnayar visited Tyagaraja's home is telling. Tyagaraja's student, Nannu Iyer and Ramayengar render Ye Paapmu Jaisitara in Raga Athana. Then when Tyagaraja requested Krishnayar to sing, the latter rendered an Alapana of Athana, picked up the Pallavi line Ye Paapmu Jaisitara and sang many Sangatis and Kalpanaswara. After this, at Tyagaraja's request, he composed the Pallavi of the Kirtana, Summa Summa Varaguma Sukham, and added hundreds of Sangatis. Though U.A. Swaminatha Iyer uses the term Sangati, it is likely Krishnayar was singing Neraval. A study of the notations published in the various publications from mid-19th century startle us with similarities to some present-day renditions, while at the same time pointing to stark differences that are difficult to resolve. Descriptions of music performances and artists of the late 19th century and early 20th century by scholars and musicians such as U.V. Swaminatha Iyer, C.R. Day, Sulamangalam Vaidyanatha Bhagavatar, V.N. Bhatkande, and Mudikondan Venkatrama Iyer reveal many variations in the form and content of a music concert. From these sources and from the oral traditions that we've been bequeathed, we attempt to define Carnatic music. All these parcels of wisdom are interpreted through the voices of the musicians of the early 20th century because technological developments for the first time enabled the audio recording of music. Within the traditions that have been received are also hidden conventions, which are unquestioned norms or conveniences that come with little or no thought behind them. Every artist needs to think seriously about these two interpretations of Sampradaya, tradition and convention, because we have a responsibility to comprehend our traditions and not allow for dominant conventions to cloud our critical thought. This line of investigation will lead to contestations and debates, which are important because they will provide clarity on where we came from, our present nature, and help us envision the future. These questions of Sampradaya, learning, research, and performance have become that much more complicated today. Social media platforms have truncated time to such an extent that music shared on them is more about exciting than unraveling. Every art form has a minimum threshold of duration that it needs to open itself up to the receiver. When that is breached, the music loses its integrity. Even in the Instagram stories shared from live concerts, more often than not, it's moments of instant gratification that find their way onto the platform. Social media is forcing us to become homogeneous in the camera angles we opt for, the way we present ourselves, speak, and sing. Gen Z may argue that we are moving into times when there will be different sets of musicians operating in the real and the virtual world. While this might be true, to ignore or brush aside the detrimental effect that these new forces of consumption are having on the texture of Carnatic music would be irresponsible. With so much happening in the virtual universe, we have forgotten Carnatic music's Sabha culture. I was told by many prominent musicians that between June and September this year, there were hardly any Sabha concerts. In the past, after the lull of the summer months, concerts resumed in mid-June, picking up pace by August. Most cities had sabhas of different sizes and audience reach. Not only were these sabhas located in prominent suburbs of metros, but also dotted smaller cities and towns. This sabha network is a unique feeder system that provides consistent opportunities to musicians who are at various stages in their musical career. The smaller sabhas help them gain experience, receive constructive feedback from rasikas, and rise in the profession. This network has weakened, and this should worry all of us. While we gather every December and celebrate Carnatic music, we have to remember that it needs to flourish throughout the year, in the nooks and corners of our cities and towns. I believe musicians and institutions such as the Music Academy need to come together and reimagine and revive the smaller sabhas, some of which are decades old, so that Carnatic music is not confined to just a few places. As a young boy, hopping from one concert to another, absorbing all the music, I remember noticing that it was not just the concerts of the famous that rasikas flocked. Concerts of high-caliber musicians who were not necessarily famous or popular also drew sizable, discerning audiences. Rasikas were not just passive absorbers of music, they were active participants in nurturing serious Carnatic music. Organizations also made it a point to provide a stage for these musicians, recognizing their music and their role within the music's culture. This gave Carnatic music a great deal of depth. I'm concerned that this is not quite the case today, because of which the art of many wonderful musicians remains in the shade. There is a great and undoubted passion for Carnatic music, but music lovers must not see themselves as music consumers. There is no point in celebrating Carnatic music's musical paramparas if you are unwilling to support musicians who represent and carry forward these important legacies. For any field of activity, including Carnatic music, to remain utterly honest, relevant, and democratic, it needs to be diverse. Most of us assembled here are insiders, and we need to ask ourselves truthfully if we are welcoming of all people. I prefer to use the term non-exclusive rather than inclusive, because the latter is burdened with power, sympathy, one might even say condescension. Once a space is non-exclusive, it can be home to anyone. Exclusivity is developed because of historical and societal practices. It is up to us to recognize our own exclusivity and address this separation. We hear people counter this suggestion with the question, did we stop anyone? Little do they realize that the fears and apprehensions of those on the fringes and beyond are deep psychological and emotional wounds that have been passed on through generations and reinforced by our thoughtless words and actions. We must work towards the social ideal of unfettered entry, because every individual, irrespective of their social, cultural, or economic position, must have a right to Carnatic music. Creating a Carnatic music environment that is more socially representative will not happen overnight. It requires us to discard preconceived notions, move out of our comfort zones, put in concerted and constant effort. Keeping aside exceptions, it may take a few generations before we witness major social shifts in Carnatic music. A majority of the first-generation learners may not become performers, but by ensuring that they learn from the best, and more importantly, feel that they belong within the Carnatic fold, we will create a generation of musicians who will teach this art form. Others from these communities will follow suit and knock at the doors of Carnatic music. In a few generations, there is a distinct possibility that many stars will emerge from marginalized sections of society. As teachers, there are so many things we take for granted because students from within the Carnatic ambit are already culturally attuned. When a student who does not inhabit this space comes to learn from us, we need to reimagine the way we teach and communicate. Only one part of music learning happens within the music classroom. A lot more is gathered from listening to concerts and self-learning. To us, both these activities seem obvious, but to a new entrant, it is not. We must put greater effort to making concerts accessible. And let me define access. By accessible, I'm not only referring to free concerts, no. But it also means that we need to reflect upon ourselves, change our cultural habits, and receive honestly with open arms. Students need to be patiently guided on how to listen, what to listen to, the importance of rigor, methods of practice. There's so much to do. As a community of musicians, aficionados, institutions, and sponsors, we need to invest in providing socio-cultural and financial support to these first-generation Carnatic music learners. Beyond these imperative structural changes, as teachers, we need to become non-judgmental and treat every student with respect and affection. For making and sharing beautiful unbound music, the environment must be utterly safe and uninfringing for everyone, musicians, organizers, and the audience. Privacy, a word that we rarely hear in the world of the arts, but is central to creating art, dwells in such a place. Privacy is creativity in dignity, a space where every aspect of being, from the physical to the intellectual to the aesthetic and emotional, lives, liberated from artistic and personal anxiety, from competitive tension, and above all, from fear of exclusion. Privacy for an artist is solitude, not in the sense of shutting off from contact, but closing into a relationship of the profoundest creative intimacy with the soul of art. Privacy is, in fact, just about being, just being. For this to happen, society has to actively participate in creating such a secure and, very importantly, fear-free ambience. Because I occupy many roles in public life, people often ask me, how would I like to be known? I am primarily a Carnatic musician. It is my conscience and reveals to me my own limitations and opens my eyes to realities that elude my intellect. Everything I write or say comes from the deep realization that is embedded in the experience of this music. This does not mean that I'm always right, but the music has given me the strength to remain silent and learn. Carnatic music, like any art form, will reveal the truth if we allow it to do so. But if we choose to hold it by the scruff of its neck and conquer it, music will merely satisfy our requirements. I'll end by saying, the choice is ours. Do we want Carnatic music to spread its wings and roam the skies, or do we want to control it within our closed palms? Thank you.